Across the Sea, in my opinion, is one of Weezer's best songs to date, both musically and lyrically. My opinion may come across as controversial to many, or even just mildly surprising due to the fact that the song often gets belittled due to that one line. If you don't know what I mean, go listen to Across the Sea right now. You're sure to either enjoy it or judge me heavily for what I've said thus far. As much as the overall premise of the song is off-putting to many, to me it is a perfect example of raw, exaggerated, and unfiltered expression of emotion. I don't just mean this in the sense that he threw all of his thoughts onto a paper and sang it, but more in the way of the song being a well-constructed version of processing loneliness. Allow me to explain. Across the Sea came about in a very interesting time of Weezer frontman Rivers Cuomo's life. He was in his early 20s and thrust into the rock industry at a surprising time and speed, with a reputation he didn't expect to acquire. Cuomo went from living on religious grounds with his family to a less isolated place in Connecticut where he attended high school. While in high school, he and his brother changed their names to be more conventional, as advised by his mother, in hopes of blending in with other kids and limiting bullying. Though Cuomo says he remembers his schooling on the religious grounds fondly, it was a fairly difficult adjustment to go from a small school on those grounds to a large high school in a completely different crowd. Even with the name changes, he and his brother had to endure severe bullying in high school, and were out of touch from what was considered normal. That being said, Cuomo fell in love with rock music at a young age, which got him through a lot of life with motivation intact. He started a number of small bands in high school, including a metal one, before finally creating Weezer, which took off fairly quickly. They went from being no-name nerds to the next upcoming rock stars in a heartbeat. Though obviously that is an accomplishment, it didn't quite play out the way Cuomo had hoped for. In his mind, rock stars were badass and seen as strong, wild, and cool. And despite feedback on the newly released Blue album being positive, many seemed to take it as satire comedic, which unfortunately was not what Rivers Cuomo was going for at all. Even as a rock star, he felt he was viewed as a laughingstock nerd. To be quite honest, he basically was. He had new opportunities as a rock star and got invited to hang out with girls and do drugs, go to parties, but he still didn't fit in with the crowd. This is what led to the spiraling depression that defines the Pinkerton era. Rivers Cuomo was at an all-time low. He got a painful knee surgery which further isolated him into his loneliness. He pushed away his friends often to write more songs for Weezer's next album, and an underlying guilt about his newly acquired imposter syndrome continued to fester. He initially wrote Pinkerton as a rock opera under the title Songs of the Black Hole that had a whole plot set to its own music, but ultimately was scrapped when he decided mainstream audiences would likely not understand or appreciate it. The switch in plans was very sudden, and the band was far into production of the rock opera, but that's more lore for another day. It has, a whole fan base. Many of the songs off Pinkerton were reused and reworked songs from the original project, except for a certain few which were written after the rock opera was scrapped. The Good Life, El Scorcho, Pink Triangle, Butterfly, and none other than Across the Sea were written when Cuomo was at his most vulnerable and, as a result, most unfiltered. One thing about Weezer's lyrics is that a lot of the time they are extremely literal. This applies more than ever to the tracks written exclusively for Pinkerton. For example, Pink Triangle is based off the real events of a real woman saying she was a lesbian and that's why she wasn't interested in Rivers. Across the Sea is no exception. The events laid out right off the bat in the song are based off real experiences, as Cuomo did receive a fan's letter shortly after the Blue album was released. Given that his fame was very recent at the time, the letter held a more significant value, and he took it and really ran with it. Despite the very specific and unique scenarios that build the narrative of the song, it somehow still speaks to audiences on a personal level. Though the personal touches of the details or the events in Cuomo's life are prominent in the song, what makes its message stand out is far more big picture than that. Rivers Cuomo himself has stated that all the lyrics were written in a way that's purposefully exaggerated. To fully appreciate Across the Sea for what it is, it's best to view it for its theme, with the awkward details serving as more of a quirky and vulnerable tone of the story rather than taking the forefront. The story begins with the introductory building blocks of the narrative, with you are a 18-year-old girl who really weird wording. Already we got a character and a setting established. The lyrics from here continue to be very literal, outlining how she sent the letter asking personal questions because she was a big fan and heard Weezer on the radio. We jump into the chorus for the first time, which I personally imagine is Rivers Cuomo's initial reaction to reading the letter. In a headspace where he's already feeling extremely misunderstood and isolated, there is this person who is showing a genuine interest in even the smallest details of his life. His knee-jerk reaction is wishing that person were with him, so their interest could make him feel less alone. Then his thoughts wander to a more romantic tone, since of course this is a young woman, and he stops himself from going there since he knows between power dynamics, age gaps, location differences, and just straight up not knowing this person at all. It is unrealistic for it to go there. He doubles back from his initial obsessive tendencies by settling for viewing it as a simple relationship that starts with a letter and ends with a song, and that's that. That's all there is to it. The obsessive thoughts persist, though, as he admires the details of the letter more, such as the stationery. It gets weird from here. Here's the part where everyone goes,
"Oh no, the song is gross. What is this?"
And if you did that too, you wouldn't be wrong. It gets gross, but allow it to go there for a second. We get into the part of the song where he wonders increasingly personal things about the woman who wrote the letter, and I would argue that this part of the song is actually sort of necessary for the narrative. The protagonist feels disgusted with himself, and the lines are purposefully exaggerated to give a sense of discomfort to the listener, which reflects the same shame he feels towards himself. For anyone who's a hopeless romantic, extreme loneliness can lead to clinging to the smallest of things and imagining where they could lead. You look for a charming love story in the smallest of places, not because you actually expect it, but because a small part of you longs to be seen and understood. And when you don't feel completely understood by those around you, you imagine you are by others. That's exactly what happened in the song. He projects daydreams onto this letter he's received, just all in hopes of one day curing his depressing isolation from deep connections. Is it a little creepy? Absolutely, but it's also relatable. It's about the common longing for romance many people, just like Cuomo, have, that they cope with by thinking just as he illustrates in the lyrics of Across the Sea. It's a longing for connection that is just out of reach. It's a hope that one day you'll know all those little details about someone who knows you in the same way. There's also something to the fact that projecting this want onto a letter from someone who could be anyone creates a bit of safety in the illusion he's made for himself, since he'll never have to confront the reality of meeting this person, and she can just stay in his mind as an ideal. This more personal meaning of the song explains why Cuomo goes into a seemingly unrelated tangent for the bridge, where he sings about when he was 10. The main idea of the story is that he was trying to gain approval from his mother, as he tried to gain approval through many people throughout his life. All he tried to do was be good, or a good little boy, in his own submissive wording. And by doing that, he further shamed himself and left himself feeling different and separated from others. The song builds further, along with his breakdown, as he sings that this business is really lame, displaying how the rock industry isn't giving him the satisfaction and acceptance he's been looking for. That being said, as the song reaches its climax, he finds solace in the fans, sending all of their love from around the world. The love from around the world is more bittersweet than anything, because it gives him the love he's been looking for in a sense, while also seeming just out of reach since it's not the personal connection he craves. Now he had finally gained the admiration of others that he strived for his whole life, but he still feels utterly alone. He goes back to the chorus, just as one would go back to their obsessive thoughts, stronger than ever, further patronizing himself by singing about how far away from the loving fan he's projected onto is. But he's still finding slight comfort in the fact that he has her letter and she has his song. At the end of the day, the song isn't about the letter, it isn't about the girl, it isn't even about the weird line. It's about feeling disgusted in a misunderstood loneliness where you can only wonder how other people feel and create your own views of what could be out of the smallest interactions. Across the Sea is a song about Rivers coming to terms with his own loneliness and a whole process of built-up depression stemming from a young age. It's about the tendency that comes with loneliness to hold on tight to any affection sent your way, and it's about feeling terrible for not having those dreams in your reality. All of this expressed in the raw and unfiltered emotions that are present in Across the Sea. As much as he tries to imagine he is more, the only connection Rivers Cuomo has in this song is a letter from someone he'll never